And we let him know. We talked
Yeah,
to him.
yeah. All right. Now joining us from beautiful Sanibel, Florida, is Dr. Scott Crater, and Dr. Crater is running for city council. There are 6 candidates running for 3 open seats. It's a wild and woolly race down there in Sanibel. When was the last time you ever remember, Doctor, this many candidates running for this many open seats?
It's been decades, so I don't remember. It's been a long time. And, we have 6 good people running for 3 spots. And I think a lot of, because there were 3 open seats, that's what motivated people to run, because they really weren't running against anyone. So it's a small town, so it's very friendly.
How long have you been a resident of Sanibel?
I moved here 13 years ago, so in 2008. And at that time, my oldest son was 6, and we have 3 kids. And so we had 3 little kids. And now he's 19 and in college. So a lot's changed.
Go ahead.
So first off, how's the campaign going?
It's going well. The whole concept of campaigning is completely alien to me and probably to most of the others in the race. So it's a lot of just emailing your friends, texting your friends, because it's such a small town that you're reaching out directly to people. That's the most effective thing that you can do.
So I was looking back at something in we'll deal with the COVID thing, because that seems to be one of the biggest things that's facing every area, but certainly Sanibel. I know that you said that continuing the mask policy for indoor spaces through most of 2021 and beyond, if needed. Things change so quickly with this. Is that still your feeling?
Yeah, I think, Sanibel, the average age is 67 years old. So it's a very different community than the rest of Lee County or pretty much anywhere in the United States. I think the job of an elected official in part is to reflect what the population wants. And the population here simply wants as many precautions as possible. At least 90% of them do. Is there a minority who feel that it's too much? And yes, there is a minority, but they're a really small minority. Most people here are very cautious, and the more we can make the local senior residents of Sanibel feel comfortable, actually the better the economy will do on the island. If you talk to a shopkeeper on Sanibel, their best customer is a local person who's 70 years old or 80 years old, who comes in to buy products, clothing, toys for their grandchildren, whatever. It's a different kind of community. And if those people feel comfortable going into a store, the stores are going to do better. It's just that simple. The day trippers tend not to spend as much money as the people who live here for 6 months or more out of the year. And you can talk to local shopkeepers and they'll tell you that.
Just one more. You sort of alluded to the answer to this, which is that Sanibel seems to have really good compliance with the mask mandate, way more than other municipalities. So what do you attribute that to?
I think it's age. People are just older. I think they also, because they're older, they know people who have gotten seriously sick, hospitalized, died from COVID. If you're 30 years old, you don't know anybody who's been hospitalized or died from COVID, because all your friends are 30. And yes, if you're 30, you basically have very, very little to worry about. I mean, you read in the press about a 30-year-old getting COVID and dying, or serious, like long hauler COVID. That's rare. That's very rare. On the other hand, if an 80-year-old gets COVID, there's a strong risk of being hospitalized or dying from it. And, these people know people who that's happened to. I mean, personally, I take care of elderly people every single day. I mean, I'm a dermatologist, but by default, I'm a geriatric dermatologist because I'm in Southwest Florida. And therefore, I've had patients who've died from COVID. And these are people, I saw them in October and they walked in the office, they walked out, they drove themselves to the appointment. They know what day it is. They know what time it is. they're playing golf, and 2 months later, their wife sends me a card and says, so and so died. So these are not nursing home patients on oxygen, but they are old, and that's what they have in common. I mean, there are plenty of vivacious 75, 80-year-olds in Southwest Florida who are at risk of dying from COVID, and they don't want to. They want to live as long as they possibly can. So, and COVID took them too soon. These are people who are retired in a fashion that all of us wish we could retire in that they're healthy, relatively speaking, and walking and talking. Yes, 25 or so percent of COVID deaths are in nursing homes, but the other 75% are generally older people who are having a great retirement and having a good time in Southwest Florida and dining in restaurants and shopping and doing all the things that retired people do here, and playing golf and fishing and having a pretty good retirement life.
So, Doc, this part of this political side of it has become a battle between governors, Cuomo and DeSantis, and who's done better and who's put people in nursing homes and killed them. I mean, I'm not saying that's what happened, but you hear it in the press all the time, and we probably won't know what the real truth is for years and years. But would you have preferred, or do you prefer more of a lockdown as far as restaurants and gyms and hairdressers right now compared to the way DeSantis has done things?
I would say no. I don't think that lockdowns are necessarily the way to go. I mean, if you compare Florida to California, there was an interesting item in the news yesterday, just comparing the stats. And California has been much more restrictive. And in hindsight, the data doesn't really support what they did. Now, they are different populations. You could look and say there's a lot more poor people in Southern California who are immigrants from Mexico and Central America who are living in dense, dense housing, much more dense than Florida. But still, I mean, I think, it's very, I don't think the lockdowns necessarily are the way to go. I think wearing a mask indoors is definitely the way to go. So we don't have to have lockdowns. I think we're very lucky in Florida in that we have weather where we can be outside all the time if we want to. I think crowded bars and restaurants with no masks, that's a problem. And, only in hindsight, as you say, will we know exactly if there were super spreader events. Nobody wants to get back to normal life more than I do. And look, I have traveled extensively in the past year. I mean, I've been to Maine to visit. I've been to Virginia, been to Colorado. I just got back from Colorado again. I've been to Colorado 3 times in the past year. So, I'm not afraid of things. But on the other hand, on the airplane, I'm wearing an N95 mask and I have my, eyeglasses on, and I'm washing, wiping down the surfaces and being, careful. And it's interesting that on airplanes, we don't have a lot of documented COVID transmission. There's really good air circulation on airplanes and everybody's wearing a mask. So I think that, if one thing argues in favor of wearing a mask is the fact that airplanes are really probably pretty safe. I mean, we don't really know. I haven't read any accounts of anybody where we can prove that they got COVID on an airplane once everybody was required to wear a mask.
Right. So, A being the best grade, F being the worst grade, how would you rank the job the town council, the city council is doing right now? Overall, not just right now, but last few years that you've been watching.
I'd say an A. I mean, they've done a really good job. I think they are fiscally responsible. They don't spend money that they don't have. And I think that's really important. We all need to live within our means, and nobody wants to pay more taxes. I certainly don't. And so, I think they've done a really good job. We have some difficulties because of COVID, like our recreation center, the dues collection is way down. Membership has dropped off, partly because the older people have dropped their memberships because they don't feel comfortable. If they felt comfortable, they would go more. And so we need to do work on things to make everyone feel comfortable to go and pay their dues to the rec center, for example. We did in April and May, nobody really knew nationally what the right thing to do was. But if you saw the causeway, there were huge wire fences erected on the causeway. The beaches were closed. Everything was closed. I'm not sure. And, at the time, it seemed like the right thing to do. But on Sanibel, the beach parking was closed. So therefore, a significant revenue loss there. Maybe that was a mistake, but I don't think anybody at that time, we had a horror show in New York City with people, literally dying out, in their apartments, not even being able to get into a hospital, people being found dead. So nobody really knew exactly what the right thing to do was. But in hindsight, closing the beaches and closing beach parking was probably not necessary, and probably it cost the city money. And we do know that outdoor activity is perfectly fine. I mean, you're very, very unlikely to get COVID on a beach. Now if the beach gets super crowded, that's different, but there's only so many parking spaces on Sanibel, so the beach doesn't get that crowded. It's not quite the same as Clearwater Beach or Fort Myers Beach as far as crowding.
Exactly. So, what adjustments might need to be made due to the decline in revenue as a result of COVID-19 for the next council to consider?
Oh, that's really a good question. Council has committed to building a new senior center. It's called the Center for Life. That's the name of it on Sanibel, and that may have to be deferred a year or two. The city has already purchased the building, and that's going to be then it has to be renovated. It's an old bank building that has to be renovated for that purpose. But I think that may have to be deferred, a year or so in order to make sure that we have a balanced budget. There are always other budget priorities that have to be deferred, or that may be deferred as well. That's probably one of the bigger ones. The good news is that the city has made some smart decisions as far as financing the big sewer expansion. They were able to borrow money, I think around 2.3% for 15 years to finance this very expensive but very necessary sewer expansion project. And when you can borrow money that cheap, borrowing money is not always a terrible idea when it's the terms are that good. So we just need to keep that in mind as well.
So, what is your number one priority if you get elected to the city council? What would you like to work on first, and say something hasn't been addressed, or I really need to charge forward on this one?
Well, I mean, there are two things really. One is water quality, which we can talk about, and I'm sure all the other candidates have talked about that as well. We need to use our clout and also the clout of the Fort Myers Beach Town Council, every single city and town council up and down this coast, to make sure that Tallahassee understands that sending polluted water down the Caloosahatchee River is severely detrimental to the Florida economy. For example, I was traveling in Italy a couple years ago, and I met a French-Swiss guy named Pierre, and we were talking, and I told him where I was from, and he said, "Oh, that's the place with all the water problems, Red Tide, right?" And he had never been to Sanibel ever, or Southwest Florida, but he knew of Sanibel because he had read it in some European news source about red tide and fish kills. This was the summer of 2018 when everything was really bad, when we had the horrible red tide. And, that kind of thing, people at the national and state government levels need to understand that Florida is a massive tourist economy. It's, one of the biggest in the world. And in order to preserve that, you have to have a good environment. The environment in Florida is the economy. The economy is not steel mills. It's not oil refineries. We're not Texas. We're not Michigan. It's a different kind of place. And so we need to understand that the environment is the most important thing, and it makes economic sense to preserve. And I think Governor DeSantis absolutely gets that. I don't think Rick Scott got that, but I think DeSantis 100% understands that the environment is the economy. I may disagree with him on some issues, but as far as water quality and other things go, he's done great things for us in Southwest Florida, and I look forward to that continued success. Now, as far as a specific issue, that has been addressed recently, but it needs to be readdressed, because literally as I'm sitting here on my back porch, I hear a leaf blower. It's a Sunday afternoon. I don't know where it is. It's probably a half a mile away, but I can hear it. And it is, they're not necessary. When I was 10 years old, I lived in Virginia, and we had about an acre yard, and it had probably 50 trees. And I spent a lot of weekends with my dad raking, and with an old fashioned rake, and it worked just fine. Nobody had a leaf blower back then, and we also
Right.
now. So, you know,
I know the noise ordinance or the noise pollution is an issue that you've talked about in the past. I just want to go back just a little bit to what you were talking about and ask you about the Southwest Florida Compact for Coastal Resiliency. Sorry, it's a mouthful. So can you talk a little bit about what that is and why it's important to be a member of that group?
Sure. That is an organization that's just in its infancy, and it's more to do with storm readiness and hurricane readiness and dealing with floods and high water than it is with the water quality. Although we could certainly introduce that element to it, because they're part and parcel, and all the people, all the towns and cities within this organization have the same interest of having good water quality. Basically, right now, this is just starting, and it's towns like Sanibel, Marco Island, Naples, Fort Myers Beach, everybody getting together to essentially come up with plans to deal with sea level rise, storm surge, increased storminess, etc. And part of it is is dealing with fortification, so to speak, of the coast, although more like making sure the roads are high enough and we have access to get out in case of storms. For example, the Sanibel Causeway, the highest span, the one by the toll plaza, when you come over that, at times when there's a big south wind and some big waves and a high tide, that's flooded. And it happens pretty much every summer on a day or two. And you see how close we are to being cut off from the rest of the world. And so this organization helps to deal with that. Now, the bigger problem of global warming and sea level rise, that's a federal thing. That's not us. I mean, we can make small baby steps in that area, but that's really something federal with the Paris climate.
And Doc, this is the organization that Mike Savarese is organizing, correct? Okay. We interviewed him on February 4th. If anyone's interested in going back on our beachtalkradio.com page, not Beach Talk Radio News, but we interviewed him back on February 4th. And if anyone wants to listen to more detail about that organization and how he's trying to put together all of the communities like Sanibel and Fort Myers Beach and the others, there's no financial investment in that organization yet. And we addressed all that in the interview with him. So if anyone wants to listen to it, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I don't want to run out of time, but I did want to ask you about when one of your major issues is leaf blowers. I think you got a pretty good deal going on.
Well, I think basically what I did is I bought an electric leaf blower for my landscaper to come use, because I just can't take it anymore. And I think that's a reasonable compromise. They don't work as well as the gas powered leaf blowers, but they do work. And the issue for the commercial guys is battery life, because it might be 30 minutes or at full blast that it lasts. It never lasts as long as the package says, but it lasts long enough to do my little quarter-acre yard, which is what most people have, and I think that is one approach that we could take. The council just went through all this. I had brought this topic up to Councilman Mon and to Councilman Goss a few years ago when they were on council, and before Goss was reappointed in the interim seat.
Right.
And we brought them up separately, or I brought them up, and they said, well, the best thing to do is talk to CODI, which is a Committee of the Islands, which is a long-term organization of concerned citizens about quality of life on Sanibel. So I brought it to Cody, a woman named Barbara Joy Cooley, and she had them present the idea of putting restrictions on gas-powered leaf blowers. It was debated heavily, and at that time, it was decided to at least limit the hours of operation, but not too much more beyond that. But I think that if I had my preference, I would prefer just to be rid of them.
Is it keeping people up at night? Is that what the problem is? Is it too loud? Is it? I mean, I
Well,
can't imagine in our neighborhood that people would be complaining about leaf blowers. I'm not getting it.
Okay. Well, when the weather's great, like it is today, there's
Yeah.
no on, all the windows are open. I'm sitting out on my back porch. I like to sit outside, and have windows open. And if you're trying to enjoy peace and quiet and just listen to the wind, right now, the leaf blower is off, so all I can hear is the wind rustling through the trees. It's pretty awesome. And
Gotcha.
it's a matter of peace and quiet.
Gotcha.
And before, people were starting prior to 8 a.m. So they put a restriction, said you can't start yard work with a leaf blower prior to 8 a.m.
I'm down with that for sure. I mean, or after 6 o'clock at night or something. When I try and go to bed, when you're elderly, you go to bed early at night. I discovered. Did you want to ask something first?
Just getting back to water quality, kind of on the island and the Sanibel Slough. How would you go about limiting the inputs or improving what's going into the slough at this point?
That is a great question.
Good for you.
I think we need to look carefully and work with SCCF to measure the inputs and know where they're coming from. The SCCF is the Sanibel Captiva Conservation Foundation, and they have scientists who are on their staff full time who do nothing but studies. And we need to figure out if our golf course best practices recommendations are working, and we've come up with plans as far as limiting fertilizer and times of the year for the golf courses, which are significant contributors to fertilizer runoff into the Sanibel Slough. We also need to look at the areas farther west where we need to figure out whether the nutrients going into the river are these leftover nutrients from old septic tanks or old farm fields. You have to remember there were farm fields on Sanibel, 80 years ago. They were growing tomatoes and all kinds of things. Where are these nutrients coming from? And I think we really don't exactly have a full handle on that. And studying that and understanding where they're actually coming from is really important. We do have a few 19 septic tanks left over that were never converted to sewer, and we're getting close to getting some state dollars to pitch in with our local dollars to get those last ones removed. Representative Botana has done a really good job of helping us with that. And getting that in the budget, at least as it was of about 10 days ago when I last saw him and talked to him about it.
Great. So
I just want to say I was looking on the about the best management practices and a couple of the reports, and it does seem that there's 3 golf courses out there that at least that there was a report for, and they have made considerable gains. And I think 2 of them were in full compliance and 1 is in partial compliance. So what is going on out there, at least with those 3 golf courses, seems to really, they're leveling up and making positive changes towards the inputs and the fertilizer that they're, the runoff they're doing. So I did want to mention that.
And so but what we don't know is if the fertilizer they put down 10 years ago, is it still there?
That legacy. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is it washing off every summer more gradually? And so will the changes that they have enacted more recently, have a delayed beneficial effect, but not be seen for a few more years? And I don't know the answer to that.
Right.
So rapid fire a few with us, Doc. Were you in favor of the council really doubling or it might have been more than that, the fee for non-residents to come and park?
I can't answer that rapid fire because it went it went from 124 actually to 200. Okay, this year. So if you walk in there today, they'll charge you 200. Next year it'll be 300.
Okay.
So am I in favor of that? Yes, it hadn't gone up in a long, long time. And if you come once a week, it works out to $6 per trip, and you can stay on the beach all day for $6. That's still a pretty good deal.
When you go to the voting booth on March 2nd, who would you like to see sitting next to you that isn't there now? From the other candidates now on the ballot.
Oh, did the other people answer that question?
I'll tell you after you answer.
I think we have a great group of 6 people running, and win or lose, I'd be happy with any of those people.
That's exactly what they said. So you're safe.
All right. So here's one, serious, not serious. It is a serious situation though. You are a cyclist, correct?
That's right. Yeah, I ride a bike.
And I'm sure that you wear a helmet.
Yes, I do.
Correct. Yeah. So we've been over on Sanibel, and Ed's always noticing that a lot of people that are renting bikes do not wear helmets. Is that something you would like to see, maybe a mandate for that?
I don't think so. Although I do think the Sanibel Bike Club years ago produced a video on bike safety, and my son, who's 19 now, when he was about 12, he was one of the people in the video, so I remember it well. That might be something to require people, if you're going to rent a bike, watch this video so you understand to yell out, passing on your left, that kind of thing. Don't stop in the middle of the path. If you're going to stop, pull off onto the grass and do whatever. You're going to take your picture or drink your drink or wait for your friends. Things like that, are bike safety measures. Now, helmets are required for kids. And I have seen, last summer, I saw a family riding on the bike path on Sandcap Road with maybe a 3-year-old and one of those little plastic buckets on the back. And I stopped and said, look, guys, it's a law. You have to do this. It probably wasn't a rental bike, but that's not good. I mean,
no.
That's a child's life in danger. I have wiped out heavily on my bike on Sanibel. So I broke my shoulder in 5 places, and it was complete stupidity that did it. First of all, it was not, I was just dumb. But I had a helmet on, so I didn't have a head injury and no other problems. So, wearing a helmet makes sense. Now, I also have to say that, in my medical training, I worked in the hospital and worked in the ICU, and older people, when they got a head injury, they did not do well. And so if you were going to do anything, I would recommend anyone over 60 riding a bike wear a helmet. I don't know. I'm not sure whether you make that a law or you have them sign something when they rent the bike that says, it's been recommended and I decline. But anyway, those are, I think that
I am not in favor of new regulations or laws about anything, but we bike too. Well, she doesn't bike anymore because of a crash.
If I had not had the helmet on,
the
head injury that I got would have been fatal. There's no doubt about the fact that I would have lost my life in that accident.
I think that's one no-brainer law that everybody should be required. You can't get on a bike without a helmet, but we've all fallen. If you get on a bike enough times, the odds are you're going to fall or hit something, or you could hit a pebble if you're going fast enough and crash. So anyway, and we a lot of bikers on Sanibel. Obviously, that's a way to get around town faster than a car, and the majority of people do not wear helmets. Now they're going slow too, but it doesn't take a fast speed to fall and get hurt. You just need to fall the wrong way. All right. I'm not running for election, so I'm sorry about that. So, Doc, how can people find you, get in touch with you? I know time is running out, and the mail-in ballots, I think, are due soon, like tomorrow. But lay it out there how people can reach you.
Craterforcouncil.com. Craterforcouncil.com. That's pretty straightforward. My good buddy John helped design a website for me, which was really nice. So it's got pretty much the basics of my platform on there. Also on Facebook, just my personal Facebook page under Scott Crater. You can see more information too.
Is there anything else you want to get out to to the people in terms of your unique qualities or what sets you apart from others?
Yeah, I think there are two people running in this race who really have an extensive scientific background, and it just happens to come in handy right now. And that's one of the reasons why I ran, because these issues were both with COVID and with water quality are the top two issues. John Henshaw is also a scientist, and I think knowing the difference between bacteria and viruses, and knowing the difference between a photosynthetic bacteria and a non-photosynthetic bacteria. These are things that the voters themselves need not study necessarily, but elect people that actually know about these things and care and are interested in it. I'm a science nerd. What can I say? And the science right now is really important. It shouldn't be, none of this stuff should be partisan. I mean, the Sanibel City Council race is nonpartisan. So the national issues and tensions we have nationally really don't have much play here. It's really about what's good for the people of Sanibel and what their interests are and representing them to the best that we can.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning. And we didn't get to everything, but we do appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, Doc. Good luck in the race. We appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Enjoy the great day today.
And it's quiet. Yeah. Keep it quiet over there.
That's right. All right. Dr. Scott Crater and his interview will be posted to our website. If you go to beachtalkradionews.com after a few hours today, all the interviews are loaded up there in audio and video form, so you can listen to all of them. And, if you're having an issue on Sanibel making a decision, except for Mike Miller, he declined to be part of our little show here. So before